All right. It's about time to do some Connect This. I'm having a good day. Menards put the 4x8 extruded polystyrene on sale so I can insulate my garage. I can afford to do that now. I got a truck to bring that material home in. I didn't have any caffeine for lunch, but I'm prepared to fake it. It's a good week. We're going to wrap it up strong. I'm Chris Mitchell at the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. We have a special guest today that I'll introduce last. But first, at the top of the screen, I see Ms. Kim McKinley from TAC Communications.
It's TAC Broadband. Get it right. But
TAC
second
Broadband.
of all,
he's never going to get it right.
Yeah, that's true. And thanks for being here. And that was the oddest intro we've had in 107 episodes. So congratulations.
You have no idea how excited I am. It costs $50 a sheet now. When I started doing insulation, it was like $15 a sheet. Now it's $50 a sheet, and they got it down to $39. And I'm excited. I'm saving that money. That's 20% off.
Okay, good to be here.
Yeah. Travis, welcome. Travis Carter from USI Fiber.
Hello, Mr. Mitchell. For those, because we do have an international audience, Menards is like a local Midwest version of Home Depot. So
yeah, but like way better.
Like way better. Yeah. But just letting people know.
Yeah.
So you're in a good mood today, Mr. Mitchell?
Well, I am for the next hour.
How are we going to get a rant?
We're going to work on that. We're going to work on that, Travis.
Yeah. Doug Dawson piping in from Asheville, CCG Consulting. We're going to discuss one of your stories from Pots and Pans by ccg.com. Welcome.
Well, I'm glad to be here. And just so everybody knows, today I'm insulation free. So.
Insulation free. All right. So the fun part about it is we're just going to keep talking about this. It's 2-inch thick 4x8 sheets, and I need a bunch of it, but you use expanding foam to lock it in place, and I needed to be about 40 degrees Fahrenheit to do that. So I need to store a ton of this stuff, but I got a neighbor who's out of town, and I got the keys to his garage. So I'm set while I wait for it to warm up, and I can actually use it. Our last guest is Paul Dickinson from is the director of business development at Duraline, and he came prepared, so he knows that this is par for the course. Welcome.
I'm excited and a little scared. I've watched a couple of these episodes, and I know this crazy crew, so it's going to be fun.
And we're going to talk about something you're pretty passionate about, the Fiber Optic Sensing Association, and how fiber optic cables can do a ton of other stuff if we have the cooperation of different folks to get it done, right?
Correct.
All right. So we're going to be talking about, we're going to spend some time on the fiber optic sensing topic. We're going to talk a bit about the Fiber Broadband Association released a roundup of costs for building fiber networks from 2024 that I thought was kind of interesting. We're going to talk about who owns the internet toward the end. We are going to talk a little bit here in the beginning about Ms. Ariel Roth, who is proposed to head NTIA and will set the course for a lot of government broadband investment in the next few years. Zayo has an interesting story about an AI spike in demand for fiber that I'm super puzzled about. And we're talking about the FCC killing off the effort to make sure that MDUs, apartment buildings, have more competition. And at the end, I will talk about this a little bit, but we have already scheduled our next show for 2 weeks from now. And it looks like we are going to have on a great guest to discuss how Comcast is doing the low latency stuff that they've just unveiled. And we're really excited to dig into a little bit on that. I think latency is the next big frontier that will determine how good a connection is. And we want to learn more about how Comcast is implementing that. So that's the future. Let's dig into the present. Ariel Roth is going to be head of NTIA, it looks like. She has worked most recently for Senator Ted Cruz, and prior to that, Commissioner Michael O'Reilly at the Federal Communications Commission, as well as a few other folks. Does anyone know anything about her? I wouldn't have recognized her name 4 weeks ago because I'm not that plugged in.
I only know one thing about her. She's for technology neutral. So that's
Okay.
all I've seen. Yes.
And how do you know that? Because she said it in a press
Only
release?
because she said it in the press release. Yes. So
Yeah,
Okay.
no, I've read some of her articles throughout the years over the past few days. She seems pretty level-headed. I mean, I think she's gonna everything, all the talking points that she's gonna review BEAD, all these things are no surprise to anyone. But it doesn't seem like she's incredibly right, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't know how right I mean, I know how left she's not, but I mean, I'm always curious in a situation like this. A lot of people may take what she wrote when she was working for Senator Cruz as like her opinion, but that wasn't her opinion. And not only that, now she'll be exposed to a lot of other arguments and things that she may not have considered before, and who knows. So, but she certainly seems not to be unqualified. And I don't say that because I'm
no,
trying to cast shade at
definitely
her. There's some people who are going to positions where they don't seem to have a lot of background. She seems to have as much background in this as we would expect someone in that position. And people are speaking highly of her. So
She's
If
not
anything,
controversial at
she has
all.
no, and she
Yeah.
seems to have more experience than most folks would. So
Mhm.
yeah, no, she seems very highly qualified. So
Yeah.
I think it was a good pick from the Trump administration,
Okay.
personally. I know,
Yeah.
yeah.
So we'll see where that goes. We don't want to spend a lot of time on that because I think it's still mostly sort of trying to read tea leaves. Let's dive into one in which I think everyone may know something about this. But Zayo says that they're seeing a big spike in orders for fibers, and I still don't get it. On a previous show, I had said that I don't get why AI would lead to necessarily needing more fibers. I could certainly imagine why there's a lot of more WDM and DWDM and stuff like that to some extent, but the numbers they're talking about are wild. Did anyone want to fill me in?
yeah, there's a couple of reasons. One is I think this year I saw a stat that there's something like 13 to 1400 new data centers being built, and most of them are being built in out of the way places. And so these places do not have, if you go to a place where all that's there is, 4 or 6 spare fibers, somebody's got to build a real big pipe. And so the first part of the issue is these places need to get connected to the world, and there's a whole lot of fiber has to be built to do that. Um, you're absolutely right that these data centers don't really, an AI data center is not using any more data than a Google data center who
Hey,
does
Doug,
Google search. Yeah.
can I ask you a question on that? So
Uh-huh.
we were talking that 13 to 1400 more data centers are being built this year. Where are they
Supposedly, yeah.
going? Like are we seeing them in a geographical area, or are we seeing
Oh,
them spread throughout the
they're
country?
everywhere. The biggest ones are going in Loudoun County, Virginia, which is next to the major internet pop. But they're everywhere. Just take 1,350 states; they're everywhere. I mean, I'm talking to folks in Arkansas and Wisconsin, and you name it. Their
Gary
neighborhood's getting
Bolton
one.
Gary
Yeah.
Bolton just mentioned one in Northeast Louisiana, which didn't even
Yeah.
have any fiber previously, wouldn't have been a
Correct.
candidate, but because of some of the recent investments, is now getting a major data center.
But even if someone's built a fiber to the home network, they haven't built enough fibers to support a data center because these guys want the biggest one I've seen wanted 200 fibers to leave their
Okay,
data
so let's
center,
move on
which was insane, but they
right, and that makes sense. But that doesn't
Yes.
explain a lot of this discussion. And so
No.
I don't know if anyone else wants to jump in on thoughts on why we need so much more fiber, even along established routes.
Well, the other half of the reason is they want dedicated. They don't want to share anything with anybody.
But why not?
Because they're tech bros and they want to do it their own way, and they're like, I don't want to share anything, and they have that. They're going, look, I'm putting $5 billion to build this data center. I want dedicated end-to-end transport to the internet. So that's the main reason. Most of the major fiber routes don't have a ton of extra fiber. They have a ton of extra capacity. That's not the same thing.
Well, that's what I'm wondering. I mean,
Yes.
since a lot of that stuff's been built, we can take advantage of more light waves, right? So,
Well, you would think so, but an awful lot of the old backbones are still at 100 gigabits. They haven't been upgraded, so there's not as much capacity as you think on an awful lot of those routes.
Chris, to Doug's point, they not only want dedicated and more capacity, they want it to be protected too.
Yes.
So when we start talking sensing, I'm also going to mention that a lot of hyperscalers are looking at their interconnects being protected and how they can enhance that.
Protected
Yeah.
from what? Raccoons?
Protected from damage, protected from.
There's a lot of squirrel. We already talked about this. There are a lot of squirrel outages.
No, I know.
Well, we have aerial squirrels, right? But even underground, right? Bad things can happen. So,
But what protected from what? Like, I mean, like human intrusion, all of these
human
things.
intrusion, inadvertent excavation, all kinds of things.
Okay.
Yeah, Chris, the
Yeah.
term protector, like being on a ring. A
Yeah.
lot of these would just be like one lateral. They're going to build a ring. Doug's point. They're between nowhere and nothing. So there's new routes that have to be built.
Which, yeah, if they're in the middle of nowhere, that means fiber, a brand new fiber, it's multiple directions. It's a lot.
But I
of
mean,
new
yeah,
fiber to
and
build.
I get
Yeah.
this in some cases, and like, I mean, I'm not stupid about like something, like California is building a ton of middle mile that in areas where there's really insufficient capacity. But when I see Zayo naming 5 long haul routes, Chicago to Columbus, Vegas to Reno, Atlanta to Ashburn, Minneapolis to Chicago, Columbus to Indianapolis, to me, that I'm just shocked that we don't see adequate capacity among those areas already. I mean, I would have assumed that would have been built a while ago with like extra conduits and things, and never having to like re-disturb that soil again.
Well, Reed might know in the chat better, but like I'm not sure Zayo has a Minneapolis to Chicago route. So
Yeah, part of that's the other part of it. This is them
Yeah.
putting their version in, not
And-
wanting to share somebody else's.
and if you can attach the CapEx to AI, which is the buzzword of the year right now, your shareholders are going to be smiling, and you're probably going to be able to get the financing for it. This is kind of the 5G of this year. We'll see at Metro Connect, Kim, what next year's buzzword is going to be. But right now,
I'm
it's
excited.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm guessing
You're asking the wrong question. Is why do we need this many AI data centers? That's the real question. That seems to be mind-boggling to me. So
I mean, I was in high school. I was out of high school by the time the dot-com bubble burst in the late 90s. But does this feel similar? I mean, in terms of it would be an interesting parallel in that AI may yet be super transformative, but it could still have bubbles that burst along the way.
What are you trying to say, Chris? That you're so young? Is that what you're trying to say right now? Like, I was too young to know about tech bubble burst.
Well, Chris, I mean,
No.
every one of these initiatives has winners and losers, right? For sure. There's going to be a lot of money spent, and some of it will find a good home, and I think some of it will be wasted.
yeah, some of these routes will be built in 5 years ago. Hey, there's nobody on our route. That's exactly what I expect. Yeah. So
Okay. Well, it is going to be interesting. And I think I'll just wrap up that segment with what Travis had said, which is, I mean, I feel like sometimes technologists forget the role of finance and other things in this. And certainly if you're already planning to build a route and you are better able to secure the capital because of attaching some buzzwords to it, that's how things can work. The last thing we're going to talk about before we dive into fiber optic sensing and what that means is that we talked about the Chairwoman Rosenworcel's efforts to try to resolve problems in the apartment building market. And we talked about how, I feel like sometimes a guarantee of the entire building, a bulk contract kind of works to the benefit of everyone. Sometimes it really works to the detriment. It's hard to have one rule that controls all of those situations. Low income situations are much different from a higher end building, but all of that is being tossed out. There was a rule that was going to allow people who are renting to opt out of a bulk arrangement, and that will no longer be possible. And I was just curious if anyone had any reactions to the new Federal Communications Commission tossing that out.
I will sit back and say what I've always said. I don't think it's the FCC's role to tell private owners of MDUs how they should dictate their internet service. So I like this. This makes me happy, actually. But go ahead.
yeah, I never thought it was ever even going to get through the old FCC. I mean, remember this thing was open for a whole year. They couldn't even get it voted on, and so I think there obviously was, even among their majority, there was at least one person who didn't want to vote for this. I don't know if there's been anything since net neutrality that had so many comments filed as this topic. I mean, they've just been plastered with people complaining about it. And almost everybody was on the don't do it side. So So I think they had second thoughts on it anyhow. The thing that bothered people was not that a resident could opt out. Their problem was, remember, it also tried to force open access into apartments. That was the issue, not the opting out. So,
Travis, did you have any signs of relief that because you just like things the way they are generally?
No. My opinion was I would never go to a landlord and say, "Oh, the FCC says you have to let me in."
right.
That was never going to be an approach if it passed or not. So that doesn't make much difference to me.
And that's the practical word. Who would go into a building where the landlord doesn't want them?
Yeah, right. Imagine that relationship.
Well, I mean,
Chris
so
Mitchell would. Chris Mitchell would.
I'll tell you who
ladder?
has Dane Jasper, who a lot of us hold in very high regard, running Sonic. He's done that in San Francisco, and when San Francisco told landlords you can't keep Dane out, Dane said it resolved 4 out of 5 of his problems. I haven't checked in with him more recently to see what the long-term ramifications were, but
So we like Dane. We like Dane, but what other one beside Dane? Dane is kind of he's a pusher of the buttons, right?
Monkey
So
Brains, whoever's running that today in San Francisco also. So San Francisco and Oakland have both done this, and there's a fair number of smaller ISPs that have taken advantage of it. And I'm not saying that, the city government has a different role. So I'm not disagreeing with you necessarily, Kim, about your overly broad statement about the FCC's role in all of this. But
overly broad,
way too broad. And but at the same time, I think it's a significant issue that there's probably more than 1 million people in an apartment building where they have to pay some cable company, not a good one necessarily, or a big one, but some cable company that can't hold it together, and they don't have another choice for internet access, and that sucks. This is an essential utility. We wouldn't let someone lock up a building with the electricity contract and have them not perform. We regulate it.
This is where you're going overly broad on the other side of the equation too, Chris. It's because I think it's we're assuming that there's always going to be bad actors in all of these spaces, but a lot of these contracts are actually pretty robust that the people are getting, and they're actually satisfied with their bulk internet, and they get it for cheaper because it's a bulk internet deal too.
Yeah, it's hard to run a country of 303 million people. Go ahead, Doug.
The last thing I want to say is the thing that none of these FCC things looked at is it's not the top half of the market where there are people fighting to get in these buildings. It's the bottom half where they can't talk any ISP into coming into the building. Mm-hmm. And this didn't solve that one bit. So, and that's
a question really for Travis. Is there ever a building that you wouldn't go into for whatever reason?
I think so. We have about 80,000 units we've wired since we started this project. There was one building that we just felt nobody should live in. It was so bad. So it was dangerous to wire. Other than that, we'll wire everything. And again,
Travis is the Dane of Minneapolis here. So, and most of these places are not in major metros. They're in the smaller cities where there's not even very many ISPs trying to get their business. So a lot of places don't really have a good option.
And honestly, for the last 5 years, we haven't really had a hard time getting into buildings other than buildings that are government owned. That's a whole separate problem. And maybe that's where this ruling should be, is that government buildings should be obligated to let competition in. Because I'll tell you what, no one will take your call over there.
So Mike McCarthy has done great work in San Francisco and asked that question about AT&T. And I think that's where, again, the Federal Communications Commission would be well suited, I think, to look specifically at some of the gimmicks that have been tried. Because Kim, this allows me to just do a final point as we're wrapping up, which is that the Federal Communications Commission has already used its broad authority to tell the internet service providers that they cannot have exclusive contracts, right? And so the agreements that we see are ways to try and get around that. But the problem is that when the FCC said you can't have an exclusive contract, there's no way to force a building owner to then act on that. the building owner can choose to have an exclusive contract,
Right.
but once they sign that deal, they could break it at any minute under the existing law. And so I support that as well, and that's why I think the FCC should have this authority. Although I would agree that there is a challenge as to how broadly they're going to use it. Last comments?
Yeah, I guess to Mike's point, at least in our world, we run our own cabling. We don't try to use existing cabling in buildings, and we do try to negotiate an exclusivity with the building on the use of our cables that we paid to put in.
So when you say you try to, you're saying that you don't take it as a given that they're going to be exclusive.
They're on our own cable plant. 99.9% are fine with that. You know, if you pay to put your own cable plant in, you should be able to use it. Yeah. So I'm a fan of that. Other than just anyone can use it.
Doug, any last comments, or Paul?
Nah.
I do love Juan's comment though in the comments. That just made me laugh.
I assume that Juan is just taking a piss, as they say across the pond, because that's not my opinion.
Well, here's a genius idea. How about the state mandate what we should charge for service? That's where we could do that. That's genius.
Well, I'll tell you what.
Well, he already told you that. Remember, he said the cities are doing it. Cities are doing exactly what the FCC was trying to do. So
yeah.
I mean, it's one of those things where it's easy to sit here and to be like, oh, it's funny. The state's trying to make sure everyone has great internet access. Yeah, because it's important, and because we are all missing out on the contributions of tons of people and children that don't have real opportunity in this society, and we need to solve it. And the states may not have the best solution, but we're going to keep fumbling around in the dark until we figure something out. Paul, were you going to say something?
No, I was just thinking a cute phrase. Instead of reducing the digital divide, we need to reduce the mental divide.
Yes, that's an ongoing project, I think.
I don't think that's solvable though. I'm just going to say.
So we are going to.
Chris will bring it up a couple shows from now. We'll figure it out.
We are going to transition to the fiber optic sensing situation. I will tell you, and mostly for the benefit of Juan, that when my grand plans are complete and I am ruling everything and making decisions for every person on a daily basis, we will have widespread fiber optic sensing. But until then, we're going to learn more about what that means and what are some of the barriers are to taking full advantage of it. Paul, I didn't even know what this was until a few months ago. You shared the video with me.
Well, I mean, I bet 95% of your audience doesn't know what it is either. So
yeah. Do you want me to pop the slide up, or do you want to describe a little bit about it first?
let me describe a little bit about it first.
Yeah.
So, we're all here. I mean, I remember ILSR from the last, I don't know how many years you guys been around, a couple decades at least, right? But you're all about resilience, sustainability, autonomy and for digital divide reduction and all broadband, right? So that's what I've been about my whole career, whether it's infrastructure and its rudimentary standpoint, or whether it's this new exciting technology. So I'll start by I guess I'll start at a high level. So we're spending a ton of money. We're in the process, whether it's government grants, whether it's private investment going forward, of continuing to try to make the U.S. catch up, and other folks globally who are going to try to catch up. So we're implementing a ton of broadband right now, whether it's for data centers using 10 times more data using AI or other reasons, right? That's going to continue to go on for the foreseeable future. I was talking to Gary Bolton, just a few weeks ago about this, and whether it's a BEAD or whether it's private funding, that's going to go on forever. On top of that, energy infrastructure is going to start taking off, right? Because we need that. AI drives that. And EV vehicles and all kinds of interesting. So we're going to keep building infrastructure. So the thing that a light bulb went off in my head a couple years ago, and I'll describe what the Fiber Optic Sensing Association is all this infrastructure that's already in place and the infrastructure about to be put in place, if it can only be used for something more, that will justify the cost structure of going down rural routes and low pass rates and getting the broadband and everybody else. So I chaired the Fiber Optic Sensing Association for the last couple of years. This year I'm not. I'm a board member, but I'm trying to do other cool, exciting things within that organization. And we tried to create a lot of awareness on what this technology can do. And what I guess I'm really happy you guys invited me. I'm very happy about this because every time I talk to an audience, I ask people, and you can't do it here, how many people know about the technology? And you get like 2 or 3%, right? Because people just haven't been plugged in on this at all. Someone like Kim, she gets a discussion in Uber, and it brings them up this, provokes some interest, right? So maybe we should bring up a slide. Bring up the first slide, Chris. So this is kind of where I started my career, and where I start a mental mindset to get us all grounded is, we all know this, and this is what we're building, right? That I don't care whether it's backhaul or whether it's direct connections, conduit and fiber cable are everywhere, and they're going to continue to proliferate. I don't care, 5G, 6G, seeing dead people, whatever. It's required along the roads. It's required to interconnect everything. So as you think about this, do you stop at just broadband, or do you have to stop at just broadband? What else can the fiber do to improve the business case for those who want to put the fiber in, to push it further, to lower their hurdle rate of whatever is required? So that's the message, and that's what's got me really excited. And maybe even pull up the next slide. So
well, I wanted to interrupt for a second to just make sure people have a sense. So what you're talking about is that you're connecting a bunch of homes, and in an urban area, you're paying like, $1,000-$1,500 a home to connect it. In a rural area, many multiple thousands. And then you're generating revenue off that house, or not, in some cases, if they're not paying for anything. And you're saying, what else can we do with the fiber that is already in the ground that would generate revenue to help cover those costs?
Yeah. And I want to qualify what you said a little bit. Probably the last hurdle down the road for fiber optic sensing is going to be around the home and the really distributed network around fiber to the home. That's not the sweet spot right now at all. It's basically middle mile. It's rings around cities. It's long haul routes. It's routes along highways. It's routes across bridges. It's longer routes. And you'll see when I show you what the technology is, why it lends itself to that. So this is what when we were at Fiber Broadband Association this past year, we won a really cool award. We won the Game Changer Award as the Fiber Optic Sensing Association. I should tell you what that organization is. That organization is a nonprofit like yourselves, formed in 2017 with a bunch of really cool members, including most of the large fiber cable providers around the world. You can look up on the site and see who they are, along with the providers of this technology, along with the implementers of this technology. And the technology works. The technology's been vetted. The technology's been around for a couple of decades. Chris, you and I chatted earlier about where is it being used. It's been used and it is continuing to be used around the border for security purposes. It's been used in oil and gas pipelines. And so I don't want to get too far ahead of myself because I haven't told you what it is yet. But basically, the infrastructure that's in the place now, where we're building middle mile routes and long routes on behalf of feeding fiber to the home, right, can be used for an entirely different purpose. What it does is it turns the dark telecom fiber into a continuous distributed array of sensors. And right now we're talking one dark fiber down the road. And I'm going to talk a little bit about ITU standards that are being looked at right now. It'll be a channel. It'll be a CWM channel or DWM channel dedicated to this technology. So
I just need to say that thanks for making us all look bad, Paul, for having a whole slide deck and everything prepared for your show today.
It's 4 slides, Kim. Come on. If I want to give you a whole slide deck, I'll give you 60. But I have a hard time, as you get to know me, narrowing it down to 4 slides.
When you say a dark fiber, I want to be clear. My understanding of a dark fiber is a fiber that has like no equipment on either end of it. It's just sort of sitting there.
That's correct.
You're actually using a lit fiber, though, that is right.
No, actually, let me clarify that. And probably the best way to clarify that would be to jump into the third slide. So I'll tell you what it actually is before we get too far ahead of ourselves here. So the same fiber, G dot whatever, 652 dash whatever, that's being used for broadband, we don't require, although it has advantages to use so, in some cases, a better fiber or fiber Bragg grading fiber. This same fiber is used for this technology. So I want to set the record there straight. We're not putting in new fibers on behalf of this technology. The other thing is, instead of sending pulses from one end to the other, like in broadband, and receiving it, interpreting it, which is how broadband works, what you're doing is you're sending a fine line width laser pulse down the fiber, and you're simply getting backscatter at the same location. That backscatter, which for the purposes of your audience right now, we're not going to get into, can take on various different types of backscatter, and some of it is acoustically related. Some can give you temperature information, and some can give you strain information. For the techies on this call, the way the technology works, if you think about it, the fiber, like with an OTDR, you're sending laser down the fiber, you're sending many, many pulses, and let's assume that, I don't know, I'm just going to pick something. There's an excavator 30 meters to the right of the fiber. It's making noise because it's digging. That, believe it or not, this is where it gets magical. That noise is transmitted from the excavator under the ground, through the ground, to the conduit, through the conduit, to the outer part of the cable, past whatever absorbance you have in there to the fiber, causes a micro strain in the glass, and that changes the reflectance. When that happens, then the algorithms and all the people that have developed this technology for the last couple decades can identify by the cadence, the intensity, and other cool things, actually exactly where it is within 5 or 10 meters, and can identify. So that's where the OTDR part comes in. But they actually can classify and characterize what it is. So, and can screen out background noise. So now if you go back to that slide, let me talk through that just a little bit more, Chris, unless someone wants to jump and ask me a question. So I threw some silhouettes in here, right? So it could be nefarious activities, somebody, getting into a manhole or doing something you don't want to do for a hyperscaler or whatever, or whomever. It could be an excavator, it could be a guy with a shovel, or it could be roadwise traffic. All these things create acoustic noise. All that acoustic noise will be picked up by the fiber, and it'll be classified and characterized as to what it is. So think of it almost like an infinite microphone. So instead of it being discrete IoT devices that you got to place with cameras or whatever every X number of kilometers, you're basically getting a continuous feed of what's happening within a long distance on either side of the fiber for 50 or 100 kilometers. So now, to get to your point, Chris, before I go too far, a dark fiber versus lit fiber. So the way the technology is typically implemented now is because there's a plethora of fibers in conduits and cables across right-of-ways, you dedicate a dark fiber to it. Dark fiber not having any signal on it at all. But it doesn't have to stop. That's the easiest to do. But ITU is looking at right now, how do we select and standardize on particular channels, because that would be the cool thing to do if you have a lit telecom network, for example. So this is coming. Telecom is aggressively looking at it. And Kid, did you have a question?
No, she's laughing at me and Jordan fighting over who's controlling the picture. Sorry.
Okay. So you basically, there's temperature you can gather, which affects the electrical industry, and we can go there if we have time. But for the purpose of your audience, think of it like acoustic energy. Think of it like damage prevention. Think of it as situational awareness. That's my favorite term, situational awareness. So how do you get situational awareness in a network? You put up cameras, you put up other sensors, and you identify what's going on. What if you had a passive fiber that didn't require power the entire distance, and it was giving you situational awareness? And eventually we'll get into, maybe not right now because I'll take a breath, the use cases that enables. It's amazing how many use cases that enables.
Well, and that's where I think the putting up cameras is in many cases great. If you're running a water utility, difficult to monitor all your pipes with cameras. So you had mentioned, I think, that one of the things it can do is monitor leaks and things like that. Yeah,
exactly. So just to give you examples before we get into a long laundry list here. So where it really penetrated first was oil and gas. In fact, there's an API standard right now, and this being a really good way to prevent an Olympic-sized swimming pool leak of oil coming out of a pipeline before you detect it, right? Because, and this is where the crazy magic happens. If you have a conduit and a fiber cable with standard fiber cable, maybe it's gel-filled, maybe it's super absorbent, better if it's gel-filled, a meter away from an underground oil pipeline under high pressure, and a millimeter-sized leak develops. The noise through that orifice of that leak can be picked up by the fiber, and you can say, on this particular mile with this and those location, there's something going on, go fix it. So it's just amazing. And then from a temperature perspective, If you have a bigger leak and it causes ground swell and temperature changes, you can detect that. So think about the environmental impact, think about the safety impact, think about the nefarious activity, dare we say terrorism type activity impact. All this stuff can happen now with the fiber that's already there if it's in the right location. Now, in some cases, it's not, right? And so what are we about to do? We're about to build out a ton of infrastructure. Why wouldn't we try to do two things at the same time? Solve the broadband need and move it 10 meters to the right so you can do other things with it. So that's the message that myself and the Fiber Optic Sensing Association, and by the way, I'm going to mention another cool organization here, the Alliance for Innovation and Infrastructure. I just joined their advisory council. They're all about this too. They're all about climate impacts. They're all about damage prevention, resilience in the electrical industry. If you guys aren't aware of this organization, check them out, aii.org. So very, very cool organization.
Say that again.
AII.
Look at the screen, Kim, Captain Obvious, the Paul Dickinson, Duraline, and FOSA, and AII.
Yeah. So
this is the episode where Kim and I go after each other.
Again,
Yes.
Duraline pays the bills, and of course is the leader in wonderful things like this, right? Which many of you guys know and many of your audience knows. But if you take something like this and do more with it, with the technology I'm talking about, now you've opened up a wonderful Pandora's box of use cases.
So let's hold that up again for a second, and I want to ask everyone if they have questions. But to be clear, so if you were to have that underground and you were to have all 7 channels of that filled up with different fiber counts and things like that, one fiber in it, no matter where, could be doing sensing for the area all around that whole installation.
Exactly. So you could think of all kinds of creative things you could do, right? You put this in and then you wait until the next first fiber cable goes in, and you dedicate a dark fiber before you get to the point of dedicating a DWM channel, right? And you say that one fiber can not just protect the right of way, it can protect the right of way with 5 or 10 meters on either side of it. So guess what? And this is where the village comes in. What's in a right of way? It's not typically just telecom fiber. It's utilities, it's water mains, it's gas mains, right? So if you could leverage this one fiber and do what I'm talking about doing to give you situational awareness in that right of way, everybody benefits.
All right. So let me go ahead, Kim, and then I'm going to go to Travis.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, do we have like a city or like where can people learn more about what this is actually being in day-to-day practice right now?
Yeah, that's a long conversation for another day, but fiberopticsensing.org, start there, right? That's the Fiber Optic Sensing Association. And you could read stuff there. All the member companies that are on this organization that have the technology, and by the way, down the road, probably some tier ones will join and others who are starting to implement this technology. And by the way, open access, you'll find an open access provider on there if you look carefully. There are people that are excited about this technology and want to see it happen. So that's where you would learn. And look at my LinkedIn. I've done a ton of talks in the last couple of years, and there's probably too many, where I've given lots of examples and things. But basically, that's where it is, Kim. I mean, people aren't aware of the technology, and why not? My favorite term in the world, outside of perspective, which I use with my my friends all the time, is multi-use. So I know, Chris, I sent you this earlier. Why wouldn't you want to have a network you're building out become multi-use? So within the Fiber Optic Sensing Association, we sent wording and letters to Congress and senators suggesting that as they go forward and they award tons of money, they preferentially award people who are open-minded enough to try to implement a technology along with broadband that'll benefit the cities, benefit municipalities. I mean, you guys are all about municipalities and sustainability and reliability. What's more sustainable than having something that you already have in place or you're building out that's going to protect your utilities and give you better maintenance costs?
We'll come back to some of the challenges of that before we wrap up, but I want to see, Travis, how are you reacting to all this?
So does this exist today, or is this a white paper?
No. It exists big time. So yeah.
So the practical use that I see, so our fiber network is in a metro area, so we spend a lot of time playing defense because there's a lot of digging and construction happening. So are you envisioning a scenario where we could allocate a fiber along a backbone route, the sensing, and it would be smart enough to determine if somebody was digging over into it?
So Travis, I'm going to have to send you a Starbucks card later or something. That's the perfect segue. Let me tell you quickly, if I can, the Texas 811 story. So you all know Common Ground Alliance. I'm sure you do. And you all know that there's tons of damage that occurs every year from infrastructure that people don't call, don't do the ticket, or the stuff mislabeled, and the mapping really stinks. Nobody shares results. I mean, see all of that, right? So the call centers of this country now, being led by Texas 811, are looking at, you know how you guys know how call centers work, right? I'm sure you do, right? Where everyone puts in a ticket and they have the polygons and you have to wait a couple days. Okay, well, Texas 811 has published papers. Go to their site, you'll see a big fiber optic sensing blurb right there. I think it's texas811.org, right? And we've worked with them within FOSA. I personally worked with them on doing lookups. So imagine this crazy scenario, Travis, right? Imagine that a bunch of utilities on their critical routes or telecoms have identified that this is a route I don't have redundancy. This is a route I can't have go down. This is a route where I'm tired of having drones fly over and check my stuff or doing all this other technology. I'm going to implement this technology. So they take this unit or two, and they, in 25 to 50 kilometers in each direction passively, they set up this monitoring system. Just imagine that, right? They put this in place, and then they align with a call center and say, every time I get an alert or you guys get an alert on my right of way, will you tell me whether it's an 811 sanctioned activity or not? And 811 will say, yeah, this one was fine. Oh, great. Now I know when it's starting. I know when it's stopping. That's cool. This one was not sanctioned. There's something bad going on my route. Someone's digging in the wrong spot. Guess what? An alert goes out within 2 minutes. A crew is notified and they say, stop what you're doing. I don't know why you're out there. This was never intended activity. So Travis, this is the vision, is for utilities and people in the right of way to implement this technology in a cost-effective manner. And the other thing that's changed in the industry, the costs and the functionality of the equipment have gone down. So first it was, does it work? It works. Any one of the member companies in FOSA can show you it works. If you're interested, I can help facilitate that. Number two, is it cost effective? Well, guess what? If you're one entity trying to make it cost effective, then your hurdle rate is higher. But if you're looking at the whole accumulation of who can be protected in the right of way, the costs go down. The second thing is the equipment has gone from being one directional to multi-port, and the cost has dropped tremendously in the size of a rack. So costs have gone down. We're right at the sweet spot right now for this technology to be implemented. If someone will simply do the business case, I have a municipality, I'm doing overbuild, and I can do the following, and I can reap the rewards. So,
well, you'll spend the next 100 years trying to get a municipality to do it, but a private fiber operator who is trying to protect their backbones in a basic. So, just what I'm trying to understand in the basic use case.
Yeah.
We take one fiber out of our backbone that goes from end to end, and we put your magic laser on one end, and it can determine if somebody's digging along the route and notify us?
Yes.
And so for context, Travis is a home run Ethernet network. And so he has 5,400 count fibers that are a real headache if someone were to go choppy chop on them.
Well, that was where I was going to go with it. So that's not a dedicated fiber, but is this in a specific wavelength? Can this go through like a splitter network too?
What splitters are difficult because you need a return signal coming back. And that's why I say the last frontier to be conquered here will be the true PON splitter. I mean, it'll be figured out. But right now we're talking, Travis, your best opportunity is, 5 kilometer routes or longer, middle mile routes, feeder routes. When I'm talking electric grid, I'm talking longer distribution routes or transmission routes. So you're better. You don't think of it as a fragmented, I'm going to do this through splitters and get this wonderful intelligence. That's not where we are right now. Where we are is still a huge sweet spot. I mean, middle mile providers that are out there with government funding or their own funding, private funding, who are building out routes to support the fiber to the home. They're approaching FOSA, they're approaching me and others and saying, how can I make my entire route not just a cool right of way, but how can I make it intelligent? I wish I could tell you names. I can't.
Is this like a 1U appliance that we can just put in and
it's a 1 to 2 or 3U depending on the company. Standard power. Think of it like, I'll give you an example. So I did a lot of work with Utah Department of Transportation.
Okay, but you have to keep it quick because we got to get done.
And then how much does this cost per optic? Any idea what somebody would pay for it?
We're gonna have to talk cost at times. It's a complicated topic, and Chris is telling me we're short on time. The bottom line is it's cost effective, and it depends on how fragmented it is and whether you're doing multi-port, and there's all kinds of variables.
All right. Well, I want to try it. So when are we gonna? Can we do it next week?
Reach out to me, and I'll line you up with somebody. I'm sure right now, if there are folks listening, they're going to start calling you Travis right away.
Yeah, we still have time to dig deeper. I just want to make sure Doug has a chance.
Because I think this is a great. If this works, it's an unbelievable defensive mechanism. So.
Well, it doesn't work. I'm going to be really disappointed in Paul.
Well, Chris, can you pull up the one slide you haven't shown?
I will, but I want to give Doug a chance to weigh in first.
Cool.
Yeah, no, he actually asked. I mean, cost is obviously the question. The only other observation I have, you said, when you go to put a fiber down the road, why wouldn't you just move it 6 feet to the left? Unfortunately, that's not the way our damn right-of-way rules work, and that alone is a giant problem. It's like here's where you can dig. This is the only place you can dig, and so and so it does take some big coordination.
Well, and this is what I think Paul wanted to make sure we would talk about, Doug. So you're raising the exact issue because when we were talking about this, one of the greatest challenges we have to doing this is what you've just identified, which is a reluctance of some people to play game and make sure that they're doing their part to make sure we can get the fiber where it can actually do the readings and things like that.
Oh yeah, no, that's the biggest hurdle I see. Yeah.
So I'll give you one example about transportation, Doug, if I could. So Utah Department of Transportation did a lot of work, Big and Little Canyon, with very old fiber that was intermittently put in bad locations. And what they found was it gave great situational awareness for bad fiber, 1520, not bad fiber, good broadband fiber, badly located fiber for this. There's a road called American Fork Canyon in the middle of Utah, which is very, very rural. In that particular case, folks in Utah had the foresight to put in conduit and fiber in an ideal location along that very rural road. And I think it's 2 lanes in both directions or something like that. You can literally see the cars going in both directions and get traffic, speed, and low latency information without any power grid, without any cameras, without any microwave sensors, without any induction loops. So we haven't even talked transportation. I know eventually Chris will bring up the slide and all the use cases that I've slapped together along with FOSA. This is just my catch-all. I show this whenever I give a discussion. And you screenshot it, whatever, you already have it. But there's a ton of, and these are what I consider the emerging markets that are extremely valuable and pertinent to this group in your audience, right? Telecom needs to grow and is growing now. Transportation, every DOT that I know is trying to put fiber along their major and minor roads. And utilities, as we all know, are going to need to grow to serve AI, to serve data centers, to serve EV vehicles. If you do this and you design it in the proper way, you're going to maximize, you can read as well as I, all these use cases. Now, are they perfect? No. And that's where it's important to get into the granularity. But false positives have come down tremendously. And people are seeing, wow, I can have this not for free, but for reasonable cost with a network that I'm building out. That's the primary cost, is building the network, right?
Now, if you can help this show do less false positives, we got something. So.
That was actually my question.
We ever had a positive is what I'm trying to ask you, Doug.
Okay. Good point there.
Every moment that you're on the show, Kim, is a positive.
It's almost Valentine's Day. Thank you, Chris.
I was curious, Paul, if you can speak a little bit to that. I mean, I think that is one of those things where, if you're talking about, I mean, in Travis's case, for instance, if over the course of 10 years, he avoids one unintentional cut of 5,400 fibers, I can imagine that there's still tremendous value in there. But the question is, how many ghosts is he chasing over that time also?
And that's a tough question to answer. Let me I'll give a nebulous hand-waving answer. The ghosts have gone down tremendously. And basically, there's several things that the practitioners of this technology do. They do a background noise evaluation first. If you have a crazy area in your network, which you know is always going to have activity that's uncontrollable, you can screen it out so you can identify where you want to look at it. So that's another thing. The other thing is these algorithms and libraries of information have become very sophisticated. I can hand wave and say AI and machine learning, but some of the companies claim to use just that, right? And so by looking at the intensity and the cadence and all the other experience they have, they do a really good job of lowering the false positive rate. And then you can ask yourself, okay, how do you vet that? How do you go about and make sure you're not sending crews out there to stop things? You can think of creative answers there. You can think of, I don't know, I mean, the police do this now with shot detection. They have drones that fly over and see, hey, what's going on here? I triangulated someone shot from this area. Why not have drones fly out and see if it's a real activity or not? So there's two sides of the coin. One side is the detection and making it cost effective if it were to work. The other side is once you get that alert, Travis, what do you do with it? How do you act upon it in a cost effective manner? How do you stop, a series of $100,000 damages occurring, or that one catastrophic blow up thing that you're going to avoid that you're really glad you detected ahead of time?
Kim, any last thoughts?
No, this is the smartest show I've ever been on, but I think this is fascinating, but I'm excited to go learn more because I think that we can talk about it, but I like the use cases so I can see the practicality of it.
Yeah.
And my last point is I think you're going to see the tier ones and the middle mile providers and long haul providers be the first on this before.
Yeah, well, I think
any
they're
Or
AI.
the traffic guys. Traffic guys want to count cars.
Well, I can speak to middle mile
Cars.
providers absolutely for sure, especially the new ones that are getting funding and building out new routes, right? Because I've already talked to a few of those. And I would love nothing more than the work that we've done at Utah Department of Transportation to be not just provided in a small fashion, but all the DOTs to be cognizant of that and to go forward with it. But I think the tier ones, as I already told you, there's an ITU standard that's being looked at now, a working group, as to how to integrate this and how to make it monetizable and functional for, what better indication do you need to have that it's coming for telecom?
Well, and that's, one of the things that Doug just said, I don't want to miss, but I do want to make sure we get on to some other topics. From the perspective of me thinking about how municipalities can build infrastructure, whether that's citywide or elsewhere, the ability to count traffic and to know where traffic is without having to put a significant power source on every single street corner is significant. You're talking about saving enough money, both in the build and the operations of these areas, that you could justify a fiber build where you might not be able to otherwise.
So Chris, here's the business case for someone to etch out, right? If you have the cost of induction loops, you have the cost of microwave sensors, you have the cost of cameras all along your road. You can't put enough of them to capture every incident, right? So the DOT has a portfolio of maintenance costs and CapEx costs and truck rolls that have to occur every year. What if you could put this along your route and reduce the density of those devices by 10, 20%? The business case is there right now to have a low latency way to monitor traffic, to vet it against these other devices, and you could talk climate and green issues too. There's tons of reasons why every DOT, in my opinion, should look at this and implementing along the roads. That's just one vertical market.
Right, but it's one in which I just think, when my understanding of this, one of the things I think about with telecom is how expensive electricians are, and if the avoided cost of sending an electrician out to a bunch of places, and not only that, now avoiding copper theft and stuff, it's pretty significant. Doug, you might have one last thing to say. It looks like.
No, I'm sitting here thinking of 50 different uses for it. So yes.
Yeah. You guys are welcome to reach out to me. I can hook you up with the right people, but please check out AII.org, fiberopticsensing.org, and we'll have more conversations.
I do have a question for you, Paul. Paul, can this fiber optic sensing stuff help Chris with his whatever insulation problem he has today?
Yeah.
I already use fiber insulation.
If we put a ring around his house, and someone tries to steal his insulation, he will be the first one to know within several meters and can take him out.
Okay, just was curious about that. Thank you.
The extruded polystyrene provides an air seal in addition to an R10, and so I use fiber optic on the inside of that to get a little more R value. Okay.
Next topic. Move on, please.
Not a single person in the chat has complained about my waxing eloquent on this. Okay, Fiber Broadband Association released their Cartesian fiber deployment cost annual report for 2024, and we've looked through it a little bit, and I thought it was interesting and really cool that they do it. It's a good place for people to start if you're just trying to get a sense of how some of this stuff works. So before I ask if anyone has any thoughts on it, I do want to say thank you, Paul. That was wonderful. Glad you're going to stick around for the
I
rest
see
of
a
the
ton
show
of
too.
chat questions here. So please, I don't know, maybe people can email me and I can try to talk to you.
Yeah, Paul's easy to find. And if not, you can always reach out to me and I'll connect you.
LinkedIn. Find me on LinkedIn.
All right. And Paul's sticking around. Who wants to weigh in on the FBA report?
Well, there's a whole bunch of different things in there. The one I found the most interesting to me was they're saying that the cost of construction of fiber will continue to increase in the future. And the reason for that is, the big guys, there's only like 5 companies who are building the bulk of the new fiber, AT&T and Frontier, and they've already cherry picked all the cheap stuff. So now, as AT&T wants to do 45 million more passings, they got to spend a lot more money per mile. AT&T 3 years ago, you wouldn't have caught them burying a fiber. Now they're going to have to bury fiber all over the place to meet those kind of goals. So that's one of the drivers behind the FBA's predictions and it's because we've built so many passings with fiber. The cheap, easy stuff is done now. The low-hanging fruit's been done in the cities. We're now down to the stuff that's no longer easy to get to. And I've always been wondering, AT&T says 45 million more passings. If they get 30 million into it, are they really going to do the last 15 when they're really expensive? I mean, Travis knows the difference in neighborhoods of fiber costs. It's not the same everywhere. So
right. I mean, it's one thing to announce a number. It's another thing. Economic.
It's another thing.
If the interest rates change, any number of things could make change to those plans.
Yeah. So
I do want to know.
No doubt, it's getting more expensive. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it's getting more expensive, but this is an interesting piece out of the executive summary. While this year saw deployment costs increase compared to last year, the expectation going into 2025 is that it may cool down slightly. 25% of respondents expect a cost increase of greater than 10% to occur in 2025, whereas 40% expected that cost or experienced that cost before. So people are expecting the increase to decrease, which is to say they think it'll increase by less this year than it did in previous years.
And that's more reflection of interest rates and inflation, in which Travis can talk about all day long. So yeah. So
Travis is our CFO, like on here. Is that what we're just saying? Okay.
Yes. Travis talks real numbers to us all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I think people are I wouldn't be surprised if construction didn't go up 50 cents to $1 a foot this year, and it'll go up to $1 a foot next year, and the year after, and the year after.
So to give people a sense of what that would mean, the typical costs for construction in 2024 range from $10 to $27 per foot for underground. Travis, I think you're well in that. You would agree with that range from what you saw.
Yeah, again, that's to Doug's point. A lot of the easier neighborhoods are done, so now you're getting into the more costly areas. So yes, that range is correct. Yeah.
And the range was $5 to $14 for the aerial deployments. And one of the things it said was that they found that labor was 60 to 80% of the cost of any build.
That's right too. Yeah.
So I would say labor, conduit, handholds, locate wire is 85% of your construction.
Right.
So what does that leave out? Permitting and
that's in there too. Basically everything other than fiber and connectors and
the rest is fiber splicing and connectors.
About 85% to build a conduit network.
Wait a minute. So Doug added fiber splicing, but you would have included fiber splicing in your 85%, but you wouldn't include the physical materials of the fiber, right?
Nope. The extra 15% would include the fiber materials, the pulling, the blow, the jetting, the splicing, etc. The vast majority.
But isn't splicing labor? This is where my mind is. I'm caught.
Yeah, you can capitalize labor because if it's 100% allocated to the splicing of a fiber.
Okay.
Here's a good way to think about it. Most of the labor is getting the damn conduit in the ground. I mean, that's what it boils down to.
100%.
And Chris, you didn't mention this, but if anybody on here wants to go see the report, it's actually, I think, on the FBA's site, or I followed it through on their LinkedIn profile yesterday too.
Yeah.
Ruben,
you.
we're talking, yeah. So in a metro area is different than rural. So in a metro area, it really depends on what you're running into. A lot of it is dictated by hard surface issues. I know my buddy Jay, he plows fiber cheap out in the rural communities, but in the city is your, $12 to $25 a foot.
Yeah, and it does talk about the cost of plowing. So you can, if you look at the report, you'll find more details along those lines.
Yeah,
Well, and
and city builds, especially in downtowns, they could be $300,000-$400,000 a mile because the issue there is dealing with all the gigantic amounts of infrastructure that's already under the ground.
What
I mean,
did
it
you
just
say per
gets-
mile?
I mean-
Doug? Can you repeat that?
No, I think that was
300
low even. I mean, I
Oh.
mean,
$300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a mile in downtowns.
yeah, I mean, if you're looking at like, I mean, particularly,
Yeah.
I mean, I know that California is California, but if you're like less than $1 million a mile in California, I think you're really happy. I think in some
that's-
places like downtown,
that's
you're looking at like
California.
100. But I mean, even in other places, I think you're looking at like
you can't count anything in
$100,000.
California.
I thought you were looking at like on the order of like $100,000 a city block in a number of places.
But an awful lot of that is crazy local costs. I mean, just permitting alone in cities is a nightmare locating. I mean, they just get you on every single thing you touch. So yeah.
Yeah, I think our last construction through downtown Minneapolis was a little over $100 a foot to get through there.
Yeah, so
But
that's
it's a
So that's
circuit.
that's a $500,000. Yeah. So.
I was just trying to figure that out. Is that a $500,000 or is it $5 million?
No.
That's a foot. That's 100. Okay, so yeah, it's 100.
5,280 feet in a mile times 100.
And that's today's episode of Chris doing math in his head too quickly.
Well, you need to refer to the CFO. That would be Mr. Travis on the call. So
Yeah, never doubt.
we just talk about this.
So you got to have a really good use case. I will tell you though, the one advantage of doing those downtown builds, not a lot of construction after. So you don't have a lot of operational expense moving on because nobody digs there again. So.
Is it hard to find space in some of the downtown areas? Because I know that a lot of them are just congested underneath there.
A lot of them are almost impossible. That's the
Well,
real
and
issue.
I think this is where I always enjoy Travis's perspective on the joint builds in downtown areas, where he reports that inevitably he gets Christmas Day at 3 a.m. As his time slot to build.
Yep, and you get 4 hours. So get in there.
Paul, any thoughts on any of this discussion?
No, not right now.
All right, let's jump into who owns the internet. We're going to talk more about Comcast low latency. Oh, we actually had one other. I do want to talk about this other one first. What do we think about fixed wireless access providers focusing on mobile home complexes as a business model? I think it's great. I actually think that it's like the best technology for rapidly deploying and just dealing with that situation.
This is actually
It's
a
really-
conversation that we're having right now.
Yeah.
Like, why is this such a big conversation?
Well, Rye thought it would be a good idea, and I agreed. That's why.
It's really not that different than what they're doing. As soon as you go out to rural guys like where I live, what they tend to do with fixed wireless is they don't try to serve everybody, because in hilly areas like where I live, they go pick off little pockets. So around here, they'll beam down and pick up 10 houses, 20 houses, 100 houses. So doing anything like a RV park is exactly what they try to do. So that's the only way they can justify even using it. That doesn't make nearly as much sense if you're in the big old flat open, of Minnesota, but a lot of the country, that's exactly how you build a wireless network anyway. So.
Sorry, I just want to. Ruben notes his county and the numbers, and I just want to point out Maine has a lot of granite, and so depending on where you are, I think costs are all over the place. If you can plow in Maine, great. If you're hitting granite, you're in big trouble. So
Is there a place in Maine where you don't hit granite?
I don't know about that.
Boy,
And thanks
it's
for
rocky.
clarifying, Ruben, that you're not building the network, that CCI is building the network.
I mean, I've never seen a scenario where rural's cheaper just because of your density. You just don't have the same density.
But right. It's not.
cheaper
People
per
get
mile,
confused.
not
Your cost per subscriber may change, but the actual physical costs are still quite significant.
Correct. Yeah.
All in the air, right? So Ruben, they're taking advantage. Maine has also made access to the poles a lot different, although CCI would have had access to all the poles. Okay, RV parks. One of the things I'm seeing is that it is hard to get a fiber to each unit, and so the ability to just set up a Tirana installation on the outskirts and then serve everyone has worked pretty well, I think.
Actually, you know what the real issue is? The guys who own the RV parks don't let them dig. These are private roads, and they go, "You're not screwing up my road." They won't let them in. So this way they can go right off the property and they can serve everybody, and they don't have to ask that guy any permission. That's actually what the real reason is. So
see, we ran into it different. We actually have had them pretty good success. I mean, we've only done 3 or 4, but the RV parks or mobile home parks, I guess they call them here, are pretty open to it because they bring a competitive service in, and B, we usually throw an extra pipe in for them so they can put a camera at the entrance and maybe a camera back by the dumpsters and a few other things. So, and there's no permitting issues because it's all private land. So
it's all private.
So I guess your mileage may vary. We've had really good luck, but I would never do wireless in there. I would just run fiber long term. I think it's cheaper.
But you figured it out. You're landlord friendly. A lot of folks are not. They just want to come in and
what if
Comcast,
What if FCC Chair Mitchell said that every landlord in the country had to pay for you to install their stuff? Huh?
Well, good news. We're at least 4 years away from Chris Mitchell being the head of the FCC, so we'll kick that down the street a little bit.
That does give him it gives him 4 years to go get his law degree. He kind of needs that. So
It's going to start right now. He's applying tonight.
A quote from the A-Team just jumped into my head, but in lieu of that, I'm going to jump instead to who owns the internet. Doug wrote a fun post. This is a topic that I feel like is super important and a lot of people get confused about. So I wanted to end the show with it. Who wants to jump in first with who owns the internet?
I thought it was Al Gore. Is it not?
Right. Good point. Yes. And it was a fun post because the answer is Travis owns the internet. Every foot of infrastructure that reaches people is probably the most expensive part of the internet. So the fact is everything is the internet. Well, now behind that we have the giant hubs and we have, all the servers, and then we have undersea cable. So that's like the 4 biggest components of the internet. So, and then there's the 5th component is all these guys who write the standards so it all works. So, yeah.
Well, the question is, what would you even own? I mean, I think this is one of the commenters to your piece, Doug, hit it exactly right. I mean, you described the telecommunications infrastructure that the internet uses, which is what people tend to think of. But the thing that is actually the internet is an agreement among tens of millions of people that isn't written down anywhere that they're all going to exchange traffic according to some protols. The internet doesn't exist.
It does. It really does not.
I would argue the internet is owned by ICANN. The group.
See, now that's
the
funny.
Ability to move around on it and find
the whole
things.
point of my article was the Russians said ICANN owns it, and they said the hell we do. We do not own it. That was exactly what set off the internet.
Yeah, because it's like, who owns the phone book? So sure, we could have the internet could be running, but if there's no DNS, there's really no internet for 99.9% of people.
I think that
ICANN just gives out the numbers. They don't tell anybody they don't really tell you.
Yeah, I know, but if DNS gets shut down, the internet the internet's done.
I think for your typical person, perhaps the internet would go back to people who know what IP addresses are. But I mean, you're right in that most of the things that people use it for, and a heck of a lot of devices that have DNS hard coded into it. But at the same time, I feel like it would be interesting to see if we magically remove DNS, how rapidly workarounds sprouted up and people, found they could still get to social media and things like that.
I hate this topic because now you're going to have me thinking about this all flipping weekend, and it's going to be annoy the crap out of me of who owns the internet.
Just find a college dorm room and a little bit of legal weed, and it'll be perfect conversation.
Chris, I don't know.
Wait a minute. She's in Utah. Where the hell is she going to find legal?
Yeah, she spends most of her life up in the air where there are no rules.
First of all, it is legalized medically
it?
here in Utah. Yes,
Ah,
it's shocking
wow.
enough. And second of all, I can think about this without any recreational substances, Mr. Mitchell. Now moving on.
I think Chris gives too much benefit to people. If it if it just doesn't push a button,
Right. I agree.
it,
I
it
agree with you.
doesn't work. I mean, I can't tell you the number of people that call in and say their Wi-Fi is down, and I'm like, we're in the fiber network business. Our Wi-Fi is not working, or yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, but Ruben owned me. This is so great.
Yep.
Some guy named Dennis owns the internet. I love it. I'm gonna be thinking about that all weekend, and then I'm gonna try to explain it to someone, and they're just gonna be like, "What are you talking about?"
Well, if Reed's still on here, he probably knows better than I do. But I think there was like 7 key holders that own the keys to ICANN.
Oh yeah,
Yeah. So there you go.
yeah, those are the root servers, right?
yeah, those are the guys.
Well,
Now,
there
if
was
I
an-
had to actually pick an answer, it's not only ICANN, it's the ICANN and the 3 or 4 other groups that do all the standards. They own the internet. I believe that's
well,
the answer.
one of the people wanted to know about ITU, which I think it's back to that sort of issue of the internet relies on so many telecommunications connections and things like that. Not, but in no way owns the internet. I think, and frankly, every time the ITU has attempted to try and assert some kind of ownership, people like us have screamed no.
We largely have ignored them. Yes. So, yeah.
Okay. I think it's valuable. I deeply fear a time in which the internet goes the way of radio, which is a commercial wasteland, or television, which has been heading in that direction for a while, but still has amazing pieces of content like Shoresy. If you like foul-mouthed humor and or hockey, Shoresy is unreal and can show you what you can do on a budget. Wonderful television show available on Hulu. So I'll throw that out there. And there's no discussion of insulation. So if that put you off, they don't talk about it at all. It's the one drawback of the show. So, but the internet is something
That was
that
your funniest joke you've ever made, Chris. Thank you for that.
we've got 2 of the best jokes in our history today. Right at the end of the show when our 3 listeners aren't watching anymore.
And Paul was here. You've witnessed it firsthand, Paul.
So we are going to be back in 2 weeks. We're going to have on a guest, and we are going to be once again talking about hot topics, as well as whatever other random part of my life I decide to inject into the introduction of the show. And more importantly, I'm really excited to learn more about what Comcast is doing to reduce latency so much in their network, hoping that we'll see that elsewhere in other networks. We'll probably talk about buffer bloat, at least briefly, because it's something we've barely talked about, but has significant impact on how good the network is that we use. But before we go, I want to thank you, Paul. Really great having you on here, blowing our minds. I think I would give you dispensation that if you want to come back on with a really great use case or something that you want to dig back into, I think we'd all like to learn more about how this is being implemented. So this is not the end.
It was my pleasure, and love listening to you guys chat too. So it was a lot of fun.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Doug.
You didn't rant, Chris.
You're right. This was a happy episode. There's nothing to rant about.
Has been in for like a couple weeks now. I figured you'd be going crazy.
He was fully insulated from his rant.
Oh, there we go. There we go.
It is.
All right.
We'll be talking more about what's going on, I think, but at the same time, like, it's one of those things that those of us that are working to the glorious revolution where Chris will control everything know that it's a long fight, not a short fight.
Yes.
So Travis,
Long.
Kim, and Doug, greatly appreciate your bringing your full selves to the show. And we'll see you in 2 weeks at the same time. We're planning ahead now. Anything is possible. Hope you have a great weekend. It has been another fun episode of Connect This.